So Neil, I felt like you put this topic on here because you want to take your victory laps. The offensive line was 0 sacks. Are they Super Bowl ready? And I panicked in the offseason. Talk to me about this offensive line. I'll say this. I'll set you up this way. There's a lot of shuffling going on. It was
Right.
very interesting to see what they did with Burford and Brunskill. It is going to be interesting to see what they do for the next, I think, 2 weeks without Trent Williams, possibly without McKivitz. But you're right, 0 sacks. I think it might be a little bit of the game plan. We just talked about the game plan and
Right.
getting the ball out quick and those types of things. But McGlinchey looked really good. I'll give him that. So talk to me about this offensive line, man.
So not only the 0 sacks, only I think 5 pressures, something like that. And obviously there was the big error by Burford, with just completely not blocking the best defensive player in the league for the past however many years in Aaron Donald. Definitely a big blunder. But other than that, like you mentioned, didn't really hear too much about Aaron Donald after that, right? He had a few tackles for losses and whatnot, but overall, this is what I thought the offensive line would be as far as production. People thought that it would be this big gaping weakness, big gaping hole. And it's really not that. And it's not because these guys are necessarily that much better or good or whatever. I think previous offensive lines were just hyped. This offensive line has always been good because of the game plan that Kyle Shanahan put together. And what I mean by that is there's not very many plays that you could look at in the 49ers past 5 or 6 years with Kyle Shanahan where the quarterback is just sitting back there with 5, 6, 7 seconds of time. This has always been a quick timing offense. 1, 2, 3, throw it out, get the ball out under 2.5 seconds. So the offensive line keeps the quarterback clean because of what you just mentioned, the game plan. But because it's rookies now instead of all pros and all this type of stuff, now all of a sudden it's the game plan when before it was the talent around there. And that's the only thing that I was trying to bring up is, look, this offensive line doesn't need to have a whole bunch of all pros on it because it was never necessarily that they were that much better than everybody else other than a guy like Trent Williams, right? Because at the end of the day, let's be honest, it's not like Jimmy G was holding the ball for 5, 6 seconds when Laken Tomlinson was there. He was still getting the ball out under 2.5 seconds. So for me, it was always going to be about the game, the scheme around it. So, yeah, I think to the question, Super Bowl ready, eventually there's going to be some plays where these guys got to step up and make some plays. They can't be making the type of mistakes like leaving Aaron Donald all the way unblocked and whatnot. But I think that when it is time to be in the Super Bowl, you always mention it. At that point, these guys aren't rookies anymore. So at that point, they've gone through a whole 17-game season, a deep playoff run. So their understanding of the game at that point, I think that there's a very good possibility that this offensive line won't be a reason why this team can't compete for a Super Bowl. And I'll just put it like that, Jesse.
Well, I'll say this too. Let me answer this question first. LA 49er, thank you for the comment. He says, hey, Jesse, do you think we'll see Alfredo Gutierrez at some point with playing time? I don't, man. He's so raw. I mean, maybe eventually, right? But not this season. If it gets that far down, then the 49ers are not in a good spot, right? He's just not ready. I mean, you're talking about a kid that just hasn't played a lot of football. I think it's a great story. I love that he's still around in some capacity, and maybe he can actually turn into a rostered player on a regular basis in this league eventually. But no, not this year. I don't see it, unfortunately. But I'll say this about the offensive line. Listen, I know that it doesn't seem the best right now, but when Trent Williams comes back, assuming that they can keep health from, Banks, Brendel, Burford, McGlinchey, and then you've got Brunskill coming off the bench, or you want to throw in Brunskill and you got one of those guys coming off the bench, however you want to see that offensive line, with the experience that they are getting without Trent Williams on the field for these couple weeks, I think is going to just be the best thing in the world for this offensive line. I really do. They saw Aaron Donald just yesterday. It doesn't get any better than that in this league. It doesn't. Not from the interior. Now they get to go up against Brian Burns, who's a hell of a player for the Panthers. There's some good players that they're getting ready to see. Now they should win these games, right? But then if you add in a Trent Williams, and then they've got to see Chris Jones with the Chiefs and who's the other guy? Frank Clark. You got to go see those guys. It's easy. Like it's not going to get harder than what you just went through. Without Trent Williams, McKivitz goes down. Jalen Moore has to play left tackle, which is like in case of emergency, pull the fire alarm. That's what that situation was. And it was against Aaron frickin' Donald, right? So it doesn't get scarier than that. And they were able to see through that situation. So if this offensive line can stay healthy, they're getting this game experience. They're getting these just thrown feet to the fire situations and coming through it better. This offensive line is developing very, very quickly, and I'm liking what I'm seeing so far. So very, very happy. And I agree. I think this offensive line with Trent Williams and everybody healthy certainly could be Super Bowl ready when it comes to be that time. Freddie Gonzalez says, Jesse, do you think Trent? Yes, 100%. I really think that's the game that they're targeting. He said, he was kind of cryptic about it, but he's like, I forget what the wording was, but it was basically like, expect me back very soon. They haven't put him on IR for a reason. They keep talking about 4 to 6 weeks, possibly earlier is what the wording that Shanahan has used. 4 weeks is the Chiefs. I think that is 100% the game that they plan on bringing him back, barring any setbacks, which I doubt he's going to have. He's in a boot. They're protecting it the best way they can. I expect Trent Williams back against the Chiefs, 100%. Yeah, I do. Which is fantastic. I mean, that game is going to be fun.
Just a little pushback on the whole, not to poke too many holes in your narrative, but I think the IR thing is more that they have so many people in IR. There is a limit to how many people you could put on, and there's just no depth behind Trent to bring somebody off the practice squad that's going to take a roster spot. So I think that's more the reason why he's not on IR. There's so many people. Like I think you can only do like 8,
back,
right?
I think. Yeah,
right.
You can. I think the rule is you can only bring 8 people back, but I mean, you're going to bring back Verrett. You're going to bring back Ward. That's 2.
You're going to bring back
Mitchell. That's 3.
You're
I mean, I guess that could be.
Jordan. My guy, Jordan. I can't believe I'm forgetting his last name. That the defensive Jordan Willis. You're bringing him back. You just put Aziz on there. I think.
I mean, does he deserve a roster spot at this point? I don't know.
I mean, they put him on IR for a reason. I think they like him in special teams and especially depth on the defensive line, especially interior. If Kinlaw's going to be in and out, that's another guy that could play inside. And then
I'll say this: if they thought Trent Williams was going to be out 6 to 8 weeks, which is like the longer end of a high ankle sprain, I think no doubt they put him on IR. Whether sure. It's to bring in another offensive lineman or just anybody to roster, I feel like they make that move. I think that they really believe that this is on the shorter side, and so they can manage for 4 weeks. If it's 6 or 8 weeks, or they think that's the pot. And Shanahan actually talked about this with Greg Papa. He did talk about the IR thing. So that's a great point by you. He said, hey, we can only bring 8 people back. He goes, but if we feel like this thing is going to linger, we'll absolutely address that situation and put them on IR. I think they're expecting the 4-week mark.
Right. That's good. I mean, if they could be hopeful enough to not need to put them on IR, that's a good sign.
Yeah, for sure.